everybody, thanks for tuning into today's video. If this is your first time here on the channel, please consider subscribing to Toy Warp Vintage Reviews, where I focus on toys from the 60s through the 90s and beyond. Oh, and a shout out to the Minnesota Toy Posse. If you like more contemporary adult-aimed toys and a top-notch videocast, check out my friends Brandon, Mark, and Chad on the Toy Posse YouTube page. The link will be down below, as well as on the Toy Warp Vintage Review channel page. In today's video, I'll be featuring an in-depth look at the Bachman Norfolk & Western Class J HO gauge electric train. Although I can tell you, this review for myself is bittersweet. Growing up, the only positive male influence I really had was my grandfather, a hulking mass of a man standing 6'4", 300 pounds. Despite his size though, he was very stoic, charming, and really quite intelligent. He really was fascinated with train engines even more. As far back as I can remember as a little kid, he always had an HO gauge train layout. And in true old guy fashion, spent countless hours making things for the layout from scratch. Of course, I spent a lot of those hours with him, as he made me a mini layout and had adorned it with lots of roads, so I would play with the train and my Matchbox cars as he worked away on his much larger layout. Eventually, I got to the age I got into building model cars. My mini train set was replaced by a bench and a workspace to build them. Since model cars and model railroading really weren't that far apart, I would now spend hours helping him with the train layout. This continued till I was about 16 when chasing cars and skirts became top priority. A few years later, my grandparents decided to retire to move to Florida, and my grandfather unceremoniously sold off every bit of his HO gauge layout and stock that he had without telling me. I felt a little betrayed as I wasn't offered one piece out of the entire collection, despite all the hours we had spent on it. When he passed, I was offered his G-scale stuff, and I scoffed at it as it wasn't the HO stuff I spent my childhood with him building up, so I went to someone else in the family. Recently, I just helped my grandmother move to an assisted care facility, and while cleaning out her house, I found this limited collector's edition 484J amidst all the few remaining G-scale items that I frankly forgot was there. So, to come full circle, it looks like I did get part of that HO collection, albeit 25 years later. The engine the replica is based after is truly the last bastion for the steam locomotive. At the time, the fastest engine, at 110 miles an hour with the tender in tow, it's arguably thought to be the best looking among steam engine train enthusiasts. The looks were important considering that 14 of them were ever made and were primarily used for rail passenger transportation, and only one of them survived today. This replica, produced by the Bachman Company, who has been supplying model railroad enthusiasts since 1949, the Bachman Company has such a rich history it could be an episode all on its own. But the short version is, they got into model trains in the 50s, and the 60s and 70s they were making everything from plastic animal playsets to slot car playsets. They eventually focused on just the model railroading aspect, and currently are the only company in the world to offer engines and accessories in all scales. In 1988, they first offered the Class J engine and tender, and for the Bachman Company at the time, were upscale models. The original 1988 version is considered to be the highest quality, as the chassis for the second and third version feature a split frame, and is made with more inexpensive materials. This limited collector's edition is the third version, featuring a open-sided 3-polar motor with skew winding. The second version had all 8 wheels on it doing the driving, as opposed to this one whereas it's just the rear 4. Upon opening the box, I was just a bit disappointed. I know my grandfather usually only bought top shelf items. The engine itself comes in this protective styrofoam tray. However, the rest of the box are just these cardboard inserts that hold nothing. I was expecting maybe some interchangeable parts, or perhaps even a numbered certificate of authenticity. For it being a limited collector's edition, it didn't come with any provenance. Nervous as hell, I remove the engine from the packaging. It's been a while since I've handled these, and immediately the details draw me in, especially these super fragile handrails. Wow. Next impressing me is this glossy burgundy paint accent where the number is on the engine and the tender. One thing I never understood was the lack of gloss paint on all HO engines. The semi-gloss look to the body plastic just kind of pales in comparison to the regular gloss on the real thing. This thing is heavy too. I mean, I know it's literally been a few decades since I held an HO cage engine, but it seems pretty hefty. My impression goes back to the negative side here again, though. Maybe it's just because I've been spoiled by toys with gimmicks, but it doesn't offer any kind of functionality other than its electric motor. No sound, no smoke. While greatly detailed, the tender does have these doors that almost look functional, but they're not. I don't have any track left to put it on and experience it running, but reviews I've read about it online said that its performance was less than average, especially compared to the original 1988 release. Complaints were that the plastic gears would shrink and crack, and the headlight also shone through the smokestack. The plus side reviews said it would handle sharper corners great due to the tracking wheels and stayed on the track reliably and was a great puller. Values for these can really vary. A nice example out of the box has sold for as little as $20, whereas a sealed one with a little bit of shelfware in the box can go north of $200. Most of the ones I found boxed were going in between $50 and $75. As if I remember the model railroad community at all, most enthusiasts buy these to actually use them and not just to collect. Well, it is nice to have a piece of that collection of my grandfather's. It's also been 25 years since I messed around with model trains, and I'll probably eventually sell it as I've moved on to my own collector passions. Thanks for tuning in to today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. Make sure to check out all the other toy videos featured here on the channel and subscribe.